Yep, good. Well, we're glad to have you all here today. I'm glad to be joined by my good friend and a great friend of the state of Wisconsin, Governor Tommy Thompson, and we're thrilled to have you here, Governor. Thank you. And I'll be inviting Governor Thompson to say a few words in just a moment. I'm also joined today, both behind me but also along the side, with a good number of members who previously served in one capacity or another in the Thompson administration. And I'm particularly pleased to be joined by the Secretary of Department of Workforce Development, Ray Allen, the Secretary of Department of Health Services, Linda Seemeyer, Secretary of Department of Children and Families, Eloise Anderson, and Alberta Darling, who was with us earlier today in Milwaukee. And I think I saw or heard that Senator Coles, who was with us in Green Bay, is here as well. Oh, Kathy Bernier, I was just up in your neck of the woods in Eau Claire before this. So that's right. Good to see you. And then a fair number of members of our cabinet who also have alumni positions, Secretary Chandler from Revenue, Secretary Bransel from DADCAP, Secretary Litcher from Corrections, Secretary Neitzel from Administration, and Deputy Secretary Zeitsky from Department of Administrations as well. So we're pleased to be here today, particularly with Governor Thompson, because what we're announcing will be in our state budget that we'll be presenting to the legislature in just a few weeks. What we're announcing today is a major component of that state budget that's called Wisconsin Works for Everyone. The focal point on that is we built upon the foundation that Governor Thompson put in play years ago here in state government. I was proud to be a part of it at that time in the state legislature. And what we really did was not just a Wisconsin Works 2.0, but really to take it a step even further and beyond that. Part of it, I want to lay out a number of the initiatives here, and then I'm going to invite Governor Thompson to share a few words, and then we'll wrap it up and take your questions. But it's a series of things, but with the overwhelming focus on work. That was the premise of Wisconsin Works. That's what Wisconsin Works for Everyone is all about. Now more than ever, we have a tremendous opportunity to help everyone in this state not only find a job, but a career, to ensure that everyone is out working and enjoys the dignity that comes from work. You know, we are good and decent people in this state. We will help people when they were down and out, but for those who are able, public assistance should be a trampoline, not a hammock. By that I mean the fact that we will help people with the skills and assistance, and increasingly, as you'll see, by removing the barriers to work, barriers to employment, and in turn, we have an expectation that if we give people that assistance, if we give people that help, they will enter or re-enter the workforce, and that's good for all of us. It's good for the taxpayers, it's good for employers, so I'll touch on in a moment, but most importantly, it's good for the people that we're helping. Right now in this state, we just saw this last week, the unemployment numbers came out for December. We're at 4%. 4% unemployment. When I was first running to be your governor, I remember in January of 2010, the unemployment rate was 9.2%. It is 4%, the lowest it has been since January of 2001, or better pointed out, the lowest it's been since you were governor, Tommy Thompson. So we like that trend. We like that synergy of when we were working and winning before, we're working and winning again right now. And so that's an exciting component out there. We had in 2016 more people employed in the state of Wisconsin than we've had in the history of this state. And the percentage of people working, what economists call the labor force participation rate, is one of the highest at well over 68%, well above the national rate, meaning that when unemployment goes down, it's because more people are entering the workforce. Because of that, I hear on a weekly, sometimes an even daily basis, as I know other members of our cabinet do as well, employers are increasingly telling us they need more people to put into their workforce. They need more qualified people to employ at businesses and organizations all across the state. Now is the time. Ray Allen's team has a website at the Department of Workforce Development that shows openings in the job market called jobcenterwisconsin.com. It has consistently, over the last several weeks, been at or near 80,000 job openings in the state. That means we know there are jobs to be had, but we need to remove the barriers. And so working with the legislature, who have been great partners on this in the past, we've made great strides already. For adults without children in the household, we now require in the state that those individuals have to be employed for 80 hours or more per month. And if they aren't able to achieve that, then we ask them to be enrolled for all or portion of that to get assistance in things like food shares, which is the food stamp program. We required them to look for work at least 5 days a week. And in an ongoing battle we're having with the federal government, we added in the last budget further requirements to put in place a filter to ensure that people are able to pass a drug test. And if they don't, we put our money where our mouth is. We put money in to offer rehabilitation so that people can get healthy and clean again and re-enter the workforce. That has had dramatic success in helping transition people into the workplace. Now, based upon the success that Governor Thompson brought to the forefront, not just here in Wisconsin, but literally nationally, when he and John Engler from Michigan led the charge to put in place comprehensive welfare reform at the national level in our federal government. We want to build off of that, go back to the future, and understand it's not enough just to say for adults without children. We now want to have adults who have children who are school age enter the workforce as well. And so we're going to, in our proposal, enact a similar requirement that says you need to be employed at least 80 hours a month. If you fail to be able to reach that, then we ask that you be enrolled in our job training programs for the remainder of that, so people have basic employability skills that they're able to search as we require for others multiple times a week to enter the workforce. And again, we'll be working with the federal government to get assistance to ensure that we can adequately put in place drug testing, not to be punitive, but because I hear from employers all the time who tell us, give me people who know how to work, and people can pass a drug test, and we can find a job for anyone in this state. So that's a part of it that expands upon where we've been already. But it's not just stopping there. What we've done is a comprehensive approach to ensure that Wisconsin works for everyone. We're looking at ways of removing barriers. You know, historically, through the state and the federal government, there have been barriers in the sense that people reach cliffs by which their benefits drop off dramatically. A good example of a change we're going to make is with child care. Right now with child care, if an individual reaches 200% of the federal poverty line, they hit a cliff and suddenly they get no assistance. We hear time and time again from employers, not only for people not wishing or opting to take a job, but increasingly people not willing to take a promotion that would get them a higher pay because of the concern that they'd be making more than they needed to be qualifying for things like child care and other forms of assistance. Our proposal would wean people off. So for example, with child care, they would pay an additional $1 in copay for their child care for every $3 more they're earning, so that as they progress, it wouldn't all happen at once. They'd eventually, as they earn more, they'd get to a point where they could pay for it all, but they wouldn't hit that cliff. We're looking at other ways to help groups that traditionally have had challenges, like minors, like young people and children who are in foster care and get to 18 and suddenly there's a drop-off, or minors who hit 18 and they're on SSI. Traditionally, there have been huge challenges to getting them into the workforce. We're going to create a new earned income tax credit component to help transition them into the workplace. We were just in Brown County earlier today. Brown and Kenosha County each have pilot programs where they successfully work with parents who do not have custody of their children, but who are, by court order, required to provide child support. Again, right now, there's a huge disincentive to enter the workforce. Those two counties have successfully worked with the state to encourage more people to enter the workforce. In fact, much to our surprise, one of the people that showed up to listen, in addition to the staff that was there in Brown County, was a guy who said, I got a question. He goes, it's not really a question. I just want to tell you how great this is, that I got help working again and I'm able to make my child support payment. It wasn't just good for him, it's good for his children, because as he gets into the workforce and makes more money, that's going to be more assistance for him and his family. And you look beyond this. Again, it's not just looking at traditional welfare. It's helping people with disabilities who overwhelmingly, those individuals with physical and intellectual disabilities want to work. But one of the biggest barriers in the past historically has been the fact that they're worried about losing benefits, particularly with their health conditions. And we help transition that so that there's still a safety net as they move into the workforce, and that doesn't drop all at once, or if they earn too many hours going forward at the workplace. We're even looking at other areas too. We started out on a small scale working in the Department of Corrections with our technical college, in particular in Milwaukee, training individuals who are near release to be certified, or to be certified CNAs, I should say, excuse me, not certified CNAs, to run CNC machines. I got to make sure I get the right acronym there. And we want to dramatically increase that in our budget, knowing right now there's such a high demand for people in the workforce. And we've got obviously an attentive audience in our correctional facilities. If we get people valuable skills, be it in construction, manufacturing, healthcare, and other areas, we know that if people get a good job with good pay, the chances they recycle into the correctional system goes down dramatically. Their likelihood of success goes up just as dramatically going forward. All these things and other items that are included here are all about helping ensure that Wisconsin works for everyone. Because we know right now we want to ensure that everyone not only has a job that wants a job, but people have a career path going forward, that they have a career that is right for them and for their families, and that everyone who is able to enter the workforce. It's something we've heard time and time again from the people of the state. We've heard from employers because of their dramatic needs to fill the workforce. But most importantly, and I mentioned the story of a young woman named Jessica a few years ago who voluntarily signed up for our employability training program up in Antigo. I just saw her at one of my listening sessions a couple months ago in 2016. She was proud to come and tell me that she's still fully employed and that she loved the fact that for the first time in her life, someone actually believed in her, someone actually held her accountable, someone actually thought that she could do better than the way she was doing before. There will be some critics out there, as there were when Governor Thompson introduced Wisconsin Works, who will say somehow this is attack on the poor. I couldn't disagree anymore. If you love your neighbor, the best way to help your neighbor is to help them get back up on their feet again and control their own destiny. True freedom and prosperity do not come from the mighty and clumsy hand of the government. They come from empowering people to live their own lives and control their own destinies through the dignity that is born of work. That's what we learned when Wisconsin Works was successful. We're taking that the next step forward, not only reinstating the good that was there from before, but building off of that to go beyond just welfare reform, to break down barriers to employment for people all across the state. We are united in this effort. We are hopeful. We certainly appreciate Representative Nygren, the co-chair of the Finance Committee, along with Alberta Darling, joined us in Green Bay. We've had good representation at each of our stops today. But my hope is this is something that not just Republican lawmakers, but Democrats as well can embrace, because we all know the best thing for not only our citizens, but for our children, our grandchildren, is that they have a pathway towards success, and having a path towards full employment in the state is exactly the way to do that. So I'll get off the pulpit because I get excited about this. I think the only person in this room who gets more excited than I do about things like this is the person I'm going to ask to come to the podium, my friend, your friend, one of the greatest governors in this country, not just that our state has had, but this country has had, my friend, Governor Tommy Thompson.
First, let me just thank the governor, Governor Walker, for doing this, and thank him for inviting me to the Thompson reunion for my alumni association. I appreciate that. But ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do is I wanted really to convey to you the opportunity that Governor Walker is talking about. When I came in as governor, there wasn't any of you in this room except the individuals that were on this side that were working for me. We had a real problem in Wisconsin. A problem where people from other states were coming to Wisconsin to get on welfare. It was written up in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, how individuals were coming and taking advantage of Wisconsin. And Kate Zeisky remembers that because she was with me when we were unveiling this. And so I decided what I had to do is I had to change the attitude. You got to realize that the legislature is controlled by Democrats, not Republicans. So it's going to be a tough sell. So what I did is I sat down with welfare mothers all over the state, had lunch with them, just welfare mothers and myself. And I said, why don't you work? What is the problem? They said, well, Governor, if I go to work, I lose health care for my children. Who's going to take care of them? I said, what if I provide health care for you and your children if you go to work? They said, that'd be good. But who's going to take care of my children when I'm working? What if we provide daycare for you and your children if you go to work? They said, that's great, but what about the fact that I dropped out of school when I was 14 or 15? I don't have any skills. What if we provide vocational education to give you an opportunity to have a job? They said, that would be great. But I don't have transportation. I didn't know where this was going to end. And I said, what if I provide transportation? They said, fine. That is what we want. We want to work. We want an opportunity. We want the same thing as anybody else wants. We want a house. We want a good education for our children. We want to get up and go to work and feel good about ourselves. And so we passed welfare reform. And I had a tough time getting through legislation through a Democratic legislature that didn't particularly know if it was the right thing to do. And what took place was welfare mothers came to Madison and lobbied for it because they could see that the state was concerned about them. And if they went along with this, we could give them the opportunity that they wanted. And that was what W2 was all about. An opportunity, a hands up, not a handout. And it responded so successfully that we went from 100,000 families, Eloise, down to 5,000 families on welfare when I left. And it received national attention. And Bill Clinton picked it up. He vetoed it twice. But he signed it the third time. And he will tell you today that that was the most successful program he signed into law as president. And it was based upon the Wisconsin idea. 75% of the federal welfare reform bill that Bill Clinton signed was based strictly from Wisconsin. And why that is important is that people that need the help wanted it. They wanted to work. Now, Governor Walker, very passionate about this, and he wants to do the same thing. He wants to make sure that every man, woman, and child in Wisconsin, like I did, has a job, has an opportunity, can better themselves. And the government, the state government, with legislators like Alberta, individuals around this room who are going to administer it, are going to give individuals, poor people, people that don't have that second shot, an opportunity. And that's why I'm here. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. You better believe I am. Because I know it works. And I know, ladies and gentlemen of the press, that if you get behind this, this is something bigger than Governor Walker, something bigger than a Republican legislature, something bigger than a Democrat legislature. This could be a bipartisan opportunity to continue to change Wisconsin's face for the better. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here. I'm also here because my lovely daughter, Kelly Sue Thompson, is over here. And she gets better press than I do. And she strongly supports it as well from the public defenders. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now the chance to build upon something I started. But I didn't start it alone. I started with welfare mothers and legislators and Democrats and Republicans and people just like Governor Walker wanting to do something for the good of the state, for the good of humanity. And I think all of us need to endorse it, thank and applaud the governor for doing it, applaud the legislature for picking it up. The administrators here are going to administer it, and you, the press, are going to report on it. Thank you, and now it's my privilege to give you back Governor Walker and to say thank you, Governor Walker, again, for inviting me and allowing me to be involved in a big event for the good of the state of Wisconsin.
We don't have to go to church on Sunday because you got a bit of preaching out of both of us, but it's important. And for exactly what Governor Thompson mentioned, this isn't just about public policy. This affects real people's lives, and we want to give them that opportunity. I know there are people from many, many years ago who can look back and say, because of Governor Thompson, they have a better life, not just for themselves, but particularly for their children and their grandchildren, and that's the kind of legacy we want to lay going forward. So with that, we'll entertain questions.
Governor, will food share recipients who are parents need to find a job within 3 months to keep their benefits? Is that how this would work?
There's two different parts. On the federal restrictions, we don't have the same time limits requirements, so that'll be slightly different than it is with childless adults. But conceptually, the idea would be is that we'd help people immediately. Our goal would be, once we make this change, to immediately put individuals, including, as we do with childless adults, have adults with children who are school age into the program. But there are some differences in terms of time restrictions. Again, we don't have the same time limits, but our goal would be we try to get people into it right away. And the kicker here is it's the 80 hours is either for employment within a month or enrolling in job training, or both. That's what we do with the current group we work with. The goal is to get people employed, but if part of that is enrolling in our job training program, which has been highly successful. Senator Darling joined me today at ResCare in Milwaukee. They've done a phenomenal job as a partner with us, whether it's ResCare or it's been some of our partners at the county level across the state. We're looking forward to building on that.
Governor, is there any plan to increase the amount of reimbursement in Wisconsin shares? We're finding, as we're doing these stories, that daycare centers are saying, we'd like to expand, but the amount of reimbursement we're getting does not allow for that type of expansion.
We're looking at a whole bunch of areas, which we'll talk about separately as we get closer to the budget. We're looking at reimbursement for long-term care, child care, a whole assortment of other areas that would help not only in terms of services provided, but increasingly related to workforce to both attract, whether it's child care workers or certified nursing assistants when it comes to long-term care. There's some changes we're going to make that will tie into retention and attraction of those type of employees as well.
Governor, do you have estimates on how many people this would impact? I mean, do you have an estimate of how many people with children in school this would add?
There's about just over 7,000 households right now. If my memory serves me right, I think it's about 7,300 that have that would fit the criteria here, that have children who are school age who would be eligible for this. But that's households, not just individuals. Predominantly, it would be parallel that with the adult in the family.
Do you know how large the pilot program would be? How many households are you looking at for the pilot?
Again, what we'll do is it's very similar. The pattern, we don't have it spelled out yet. We'll put that in the budget, but it'll be very similar to what Governor Thompson did with the initial phases of Wisconsin Works, is to pick several different counties in a number of these categories so that you don't just have one big, one small. You have a mix to make sure that because our intention is to see this go in some areas it does go across the board statewide, but for a few of these that are pilots is to get to a statewide requirement. But we think the pilot's the right way to go. It's what Governor Thompson and his administration did to make sure you work out the kinks and make sure it can work correctly. But it'll be a spectrum between larger counties, smaller counties, and in between scattered geographically as well. Those components we'll release when we put the budget out.
How does cutting a family's benefit help the children who don't have any say over whether their parents are working or not?
We explicitly prohibit a reduction for the children, so any penalty that's involved doesn't affect the children. And the goal really here, though, is the carrot, not the stick. There's got to be some sort of enforcement component. But our focal point is we've already seen with the vast majority of individuals who use the food stamp employment training program right now who are without children, is to take that same approach going forward, and that is we begin with the premise that people want to work. I think overwhelmingly people want to work in this state. That defies some of the rhetoric. It's exactly what you heard from the welfare mothers years ago. People want to work. The barrier has not been their inability to want to work. It's been the barrier has been benefits and the structure of those benefits. So if we get people employability training for the limited number that might have an addiction issue, if we get them healthy, but if we also deal with the cliff when it comes to things like child care and other benefits, we believe that whether it's the class that you're asking a question about, or it's people with intellectual or physical disabilities or any number of others out there, if we remove the barriers that in the past historically have discouraged people from entering the workforce, people will overwhelmingly want to enter. I mean, think about it, it's human nature. I grew up in a small town, Delavan, Wisconsin, near the border. I got to tell you, I just had my 30th anniversary of high school reunion last August. I don't ever remember anybody signing my yearbook saying, good luck becoming dependent on the government. Nobody grows up wanting to become dependent on the government. That's against our human nature. We want to work. We understand, I mean, it's a biblical principle. Hard work is a part of who we are as human beings. What we've had in the past is too many barriers in Washington and too many barriers here. We had the right approach under Governor Thompson. That slipped away under the previous president and the previous administration here in state government. We want to reinforce and bring those principles back and take them even further. So it's not just applying to traditional welfare, but applying to a broad cross-section so that Wisconsin works for everyone in the state.
Governor, in terms of the housing subsidies that are given, federal subsidies to
Yep.
the city of Milwaukee's housing authority, would you be attempting to change those or only those controlled by you?
Well, we're starting out with WIDA, but we'd be willing to work with the mayor, Tony Perez in Milwaukee, and others, because again, I think their principle, and you've seen elements of this, and we looked at other jurisdictions around the country have used this particular component. They've seen tremendous success. What they've seen when they use the principles we're talking about here is as people get help getting employed, then they move out of public housing, not because they've been kicked out, they move out because they make enough to afford a home that doesn't qualify them anymore for public housing. They do well there, and somebody else can move on into that public housing. And so this ends up providing greater assistance for those who need it, whether it's with the housing vouchers or it's any number of other areas.
You said earlier your goal is the carrot, not the stick. Isn't taking benefits away a stick and not a carrot?
You have to have some element to that, otherwise you can't make it ultimately enforceable. But again, the pattern we've seen thus far is if you give people training, if you give them assistance, if you give them a pathway forward where they don't immediately lose their benefits when they hit a certain mark, whether it's taking a job or taking a raise by taking a promotion, that people overwhelmingly want to work. And so that's why I stress the carrot, but you have to have some enforcement mechanism. Again, that's one of the things we heard at many of our listening sessions where people not only concerned about the lack of number of people in the workforce, and this addresses a huge share of that. If we get more people transitioning from government dependence to true independence through work, but also people who've said, hey, you know, I'm working hard, I'm working 2 jobs to support my family and make ends meet. Why is it that somebody else is getting assistance when I'm doing all this work and it's just as challenging for me and my family? And so we want to help people, but like I said, we want it to be a trampoline and not a hammock. We want it to be a temporary structure for those who are able and not a permanent one, and having those enforcement components helps do that.
What would these job training requirements look like, and would people still be able to receive all their benefits while they're taking this training?
Sure. Yeah, no. That's exactly the parallel with what we have right now is people have the 80-hour employment requirement. If they can't match that, we don't take benefits away. We enroll them into job training. We have it all around the state. The site that Senator Darling was with me today was in the northwest side of Milwaukee, where ResCare is one of our partners there. We have partners all around the state that we've worked with in the past. Secretary Allen and his team at Department of Workforce Development does a tremendous job. We have them in rural areas, urban areas, everywhere in between. And it's just a really good placement program. It's exactly the program I mentioned, the example I gave of the woman named Jessica from Anago, who initially, before she was even required, took advantage of that program. We were starting it out voluntarily, and she's a prime example of someone who got those skills, got the training, entered the workforce, is still gainfully employed today, and we expect that here. But the beauty of this is we're not cutting people off. We're helping move them into the workforce. We're getting them the support and the training and the education that they need, because we believe human nature is such, particularly here in the Midwest, that people want to work, and we're just giving them a chance to do that.
And what concerns do you have about people who might struggle with this training but still require welfare? Is there going to be any sort of gap?
Sure. Again, if you have people who, we understand that there are going to be people with certain circumstances that are very, very difficult. Although, I should say, having talked to a number of advocates for people with disabilities, the overwhelming number of people with both intellectual and physical disabilities want to work. It's an overwhelming principle I hear time and time again. The number one concern I hear, not just from those individuals, but oftentimes their adult parents or caregivers is they're worried about the safety net not being there. They're worried about taking a job or taking additional hours, and if something doesn't work out, not being able to pull into that. The changes we're proposing here will actually help make that easier. And so, yes, there will be some people, without a doubt, who are not capable of being employed full-time. But the beauty of what we're proposing is then our resources, be it in Medicaid or other government services, the resources we have available can hone in on the people who truly need those benefits on a permanent basis, so those dollars are available. Right now, here in Wisconsin, across the nation, the fastest growing part of any state budget is Medicaid. If we can get that under control, and we have a growing, aging population here, so we know that costs are going to accelerate in that regard. We know that we're going to do more, hopefully, with the reforms we can get from people like Paul Ryan and the Congress and the new administration will help us do more on the front end, presumably with block grants to help do more to prepare children who are lower cost but higher volume. But it's that group in the middle, people who are working or should be working, who are on Medicaid and other forms of government assistance. If we can get them in the workforce, which is what all these programs, all these initiatives we're talking about under the umbrella of Wisconsin Works for Everyone, the more we transition those people from government dependence to true independence, the more the resources that are needed for those who have acute needs that are ongoing can be fully embraced. Great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.